we started with control, or we left off with control cost, and we started to do about 2/3. We got through 2/3 of it. So let's kind of touch on it again, and then let's finish the last third. So ultimately, we're looking at scope, schedule, budget. Earned value management takes the three, kind of makes them into one. So remember, all work items will carry equal weight. Meaning in our example, you got 12 websites to build in a year for $12,000. Each website scope is worth 1 month of work schedule or $1,000 budget. Okay, so that data that we get from our team members, we analyze the data and then we output information, and that information is, what's progress on the schedule, progress on the budget, et cetera, and then we'll come up with forecasts. All right, so that's our goal. That's the key output here, is to get the work performance information and then provide some forecasts for folks. Okay, so we'll take the plan, the baselines. We got to know where the proof budget, any funding requirements, and then we're going to do earned value management. So we talked about budget at completion being this is the total budget. I call this the upfront budget. This is when you get it signed off on and you haven't made any changes, you haven't done anything yet. This is the amount of money you should spend. Is what we think it is, right? So this is the budget at completion, is the initial budget. Plan value is wherever you should be at some point in time. So again, 12 websites in a year. Today's March 2nd, so we should have 2 websites completed. Right, so our planned value would be $2,000 or 2 websites. And then our earned value, well, we created 2 websites, or maybe we created 4. So our earned value would be $4,000, right? And our actual cost, it could have taken us $5,000 to do the work. So we could be ahead of schedule by 2 months or 2 websites, but still be over budget, right? The actual cost will always tell you what you've actually spent. So hopefully you've earned more value than you spent, and you've earned more value than you planned. Therefore, you'd be ahead of schedule and under budget. So those are the 4 main values there. Let me just check in. Are we good with those 4 values? Okay. Okay, so then we had the example, a project had been initiated to paint 4 walls in a room, and the work to be completed in 4 days, and each wall's $100. So therefore, the budget at completion would be $400, right? Each wall scope is worth $100 budget, or worth a day's worth of work schedule. And after 3 days, 2.5 walls have been completed, so we're behind schedule. And then when we looked at the actual cost and we added together, we'll see that we were over budget as well. All right, so remember, earned value is king. It's always going to come first in these formulas as you're studying them. So earned value minus your planned value, that's the variance between your schedule, right? What you've earned minus what you thought you should have earned, then that's the variance. And then if we take what we've earned and we've divided it by what we thought we should have earned, it'll give us the performance index. So if you remember, the schedule variance is in the past, and the performance index is current. That's what's happening. All right, so remember that. All right, so we saw we're behind schedule and we're performing 83% of what we thought we would. And then same thing with cost variance, earned value is king. So the amount of money that we've earned minus the money we've spent gives us the variance in cost, or the amount of money that we've earned divided by what we've spent, and that gives us the performance index. So same thing, past, tail light metrics, and this is the present. All right, current, this is happening. All right, so we see, take our cost variance, we're $75 over budget, and then cost performance index 0.77. For every dollar we spend, we're getting 77 cents back, or we're burning 23 cents. CPI is the most important earned value management metric. Most important earned value management metric. The exam is likely going to ask you that question, so make sure you remember that. Then the forecast. This is the future. So we have past, variances, cost and schedule. We have present. We have the performance indexes, cost and schedule. And now we have future. We have the estimate at completion. And there's 3 ways to get it. The first one says that, well, well, wait a second. We don't know what happened. All future work, all right? If we want to write that word in there again, all future work will be accomplished at the original rate. All right, so that's this formula here. We'll take the amount of money we've spent and we'll add it to our original budget minus what we've earned. Okay, so that all future work is for this number 2. All right, you got another formula that says, well, wait a minute. Regardless of how fast you go or how slow you go, you're going to produce deliverables for the same amount of money, right? You're still going to burn 23 cents for every dollar you spend. And in that sense, we'll take our budget at completion and simply divide by our cost performance index, and that'll give us an estimate, right? So the work will continue to be performed. And I had you write a couple things. It's all, the variances, your cost variances are expected to continue. Those cost variances are typical, right? Expected to continue, and they're typical. The cost variances are atypical here. All future work will be accomplished at the original rate. And then the third one, when both cost and schedule performance are going to continue and you combine them, then you're going to take the formula CPI times SPI, divide that by your budget at completion minus your earned value, and then add that to your actual cost. Okay, so those are the 3 formulas that you will memorize. And again, to know when to use it, they'll give you the words, all future work or variances are expected to continue. Then there's also the estimate to complete. Okay, so just going back to estimate at completion, what we're going to spend when it's all said and done. When this project is complete, this is what we estimate we would have spent at completion of this project. And then estimate to completion, how much will it take to finish the job, right? The remaining money, right? So we're going to take one of the EAC formulas, right, and subtract it from your actual cost. Let me come back here real quick. Remember that there's 3 formulas for earned value management, but there's 4 ways to get it. And the 4th way, and it's not on the slide, so let me just write it. The 4th way is where you take your bottom-up estimate to complete. I think I had y'all write this last time. Your bottom-up estimate to complete plus your actual costs. All right, it'll be a formula that looks like that. Plus your actual, this should be a plus sign here, plus your actual cost. And that's another EAC. It's not a formula though. Again, it is you will not be asked to compute this formula, but PMI will say, they'll give you a question that says, you and your team are unsure of what the project is going to cost. And so you've bottom up estimated all remaining costs and added it back to your spend to date. Which of the following earned value management formulas have you used? And they'll give you these 4, and you'll make sure you pick the right one. All right, so that's how you're going to answer that one. Okay. All right, so this is kind of the recap. That's where we left off last time. So let me stop here. Are we good with the formulas? Man, I know you still need to memorize them and remember when to use them. But so far, we're okay? Thumbs up, okay. All right, so now the TCPI, to complete performance index. This defines how efficient and effective your team has to be in order to either, course correct and pull yourself from over budget to under budget, or even perform more under budget, right? Or in some cases, if the team had done so well in the beginning, how easy or how ineffective can they be and still achieve the original budget? So that's what TCPI tells us, right? To complete performance index. And there's only 2 ways on the exam that they'll ask you. They'll either say that you can achieve the original budget, right? Complete on plan, or they'll call it the original budget. And on this one, you can't complete the plan, right? So your cost estimates will remain the same. Now notice both formulas look the same. We'll take our budget at completion minus our earned value and divide that by our budget at completion minus our actual cost, right? And if you think about it, I know it doesn't really work this way because we have the parentheses, but if I were to take this and this, earned value over actual cost is your CPI, right? So when we subtract the budget at completion from both of those numbers and divide it. Then it tells us the TCPI. All right, how hard, how efficient, how effective must the team be? All right, or you can't achieve the budget, and therefore you use your estimate at completion instead. Okay, so let's look at what we have here. We had our budget at completion minus earned value divided by budget at completion minus actual cost, and that gave us a TCPI of 2. That tells us that the team has to start producing deliverables for half the cost, all right? And this has no respect with regards to the speed that the team is working with. This is just how effective are they going to be with the money. So at this point, the team has to start producing, a deliverable at 50 cents on the dollar in order to improve from a 0.77 to complete the plan. All right, so it's unlikely you're going to be able to do that. So this gives you the opportunity to take a look at your team and say, can we do a 1.1 the rest of the way, a 1.2, a 1.3, maybe even a 2.0? Are we capable of doing that and getting back on budget? And if not, then, we know what our estimate's going to be. All right, so that's how TCPI is used. So when you're taking the exam and you get an EVM question, right, it can be difficult, but if you remember these 4 values here, this is literally what you want to do on the exam. All right, you take an exam, you see this, you get to your scratch paper, immediately write down BV, BAC, budget at completion, planned value, earned value, actual cost, and then go read the question and extrapolate the data and write it in. And now that you've got these 4 values, you can do any earned value management computation. The exam never gives you all 4 values. Go figure, right? What they'll do is they'll give you, let's say, planned value, budget at completion, and then actual cost, and they'll give you CPI. And they'll make you do backwards algebra to take the CPI, what equals the earned value divided by actual cost. Well, then you'll have to take your actual cost multiplied by the CPI, and that'll give you the earned value. So, PMI likes to do that. I lost you guys. See if he came back. Okay, he came back. All right, so work them all out on paper. You have 72 seconds per question. That's a long time. That's 1 minute, 12 seconds. Take your time. You have the opportunity to use the features on the exam that allow you to mark a question for review or leave it blank and come back to it, and then do all your earned value management questions at the same time. So you're going to gain efficiencies in doing the same types of questions over. You might even get to the 5th earned value management question and recognize that you made a mistake on the 1st or 2nd. All right, so use those strategies. So identify what the question is asking for. Go ahead, Dana.
What's our calculator situation for the test?
It is built in. A calculator is built into the exam, like a Windows-based computer, right? You're going to have these NEC machines, black NEC machines, black NEC monitor, keyboard, mouse, and it's Windows-based, and calculator's built in. Everything you need. They'll give you scratch paper. They'll give you a pencil. You won't be able to bring anything into the exam. I'm going to go over the parametric exam for you guys at the end and cover like from the beginning, from when you apply all the way to what you would expect at the testing center. So that way I want you to have the full experience and, have no surprises. But yeah, and by the way, because you will need the calculator on an exam for these questions, they don't give you questions with like 7 or 8 decimal places or random numbers like 1,976.23 minus, they don't give you those types of numbers. Their goal is really to see, can you remember our formulas? And if I present you with a question, do you know which one of our formulas to use? Can you apply it? That's what the exam's trying to ask. So the math questions won't be difficult. They'll just require you to recall the formulas. And so what you'll do, you identify which formula you need to use by figuring out what the question's asking for. And then you'll identify what information is given to you, what you need to figure out, and then methodically start from the top and work down. And that's it. When you guys get these questions on the exam, just go step by step. Don't make it overbearing. You know, if anything, delay them to the end if you have to, but be very methodical, be mechanical about it. So you're the PM of a project to widen a 10-mile section of freeway. The approved budget is $50 million, and the approved schedule is 40 weeks. After 22 weeks, your team has completed 6 miles of the freeway and $32 million have been spent. So calculate the ETC using the earned value management template. So the first thing we would do is we would say, okay, our budget at completion, if I'm reading this, I would see this and say, okay, I have 50 million. And then I would say my planned value, well, if I take 50 million and I divide by 40 weeks, then that's the amount of spend per week. That's literally what I would do, right? So I mean, I'd be spending about 800,000 a week, and I'd multiply that by 22 weeks, and I would get my number, whatever that is, 16 plus 1.6, 17.6 million, right? That would be my planned value at this moment. Or,
wait a minute, CJ, you said 50 million over 40 weeks?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be like 1.25 million a week? Okay.
I did my math backwards. Thank you. Thank you very much. So 1.2, 4 out of 5, 1.2. So therefore times 22, that'd be 22 plus 2.2, I guess. So 24.2 million would be our planned value at this point. Or we can look at it like this. You have to do 10 miles in 40 weeks. All right, which means you have to do a quarter mile a week. So after 22 weeks, 22 times a quarter, whatever that number is, 5 and change. Can't do that in my head, but you get it. All right, it'd be 22 divided by a quarter. That will be our planned value in scope, if you will. And then our earned value, we've completed 6 miles. So if we do 6 times 1.2, then we'll get 7.2 million. If you can see that number. Let's change the color. 7.2. And then our actual cost, they've already told us we've spent 32 million. Wow, what a project. Any questions on how we got that? Although our numbers are way off. Trying to do it in my head, 27 and a half, 30 million, 32. Which is why you have the calculator, Dana. Don't try to do it in my head the way I did. But you get the idea. Now, you can find your schedule variance, earned value minus planned value. You can find your cost variance, earned value minus actual cost. You can find your schedule performance index. All right, so the question didn't ask you anything about that, so you don't have to go there. And what the slide is alluding to is that we're strictly talking about cost. And then remember, the estimate to complete is the remaining money. All right, PMI loves to ask you questions about the estimate to complete because we'll get the estimate at completion number, and then that's what we'll go with, and usually they'll make that A. So be very skeptical when you're taking the exam if you get a question and the immediate answer is A. I'm not saying that A is not a right answer on a PMP exam. I'm saying that in standardized exams, when we bait you to pick a choice, usually A is reserved for the question or the response that we're trying to bait you to pick. All right, so be skeptical about A being an answer. Always double check. Any questions so far? Okay. So then there's trend and reserve analysis, right? So that's earned value analysis. We can look at all the numbers and analyze it from an earned value perspective, or we can just analyze what the line's doing on the graph, trend analysis. So in this case, you would have the S-curve. You'd have the S-curve on your graph, and then you might look at the numbers like that, right? So your S-curve, might look a little something like this, right? It's never like a real S. But what it allows you to do is, at different points of time within your project, you'll be able to go and find what your spend is. And, you know, it usually shows you how you ramp up. And then as the project starts to end, you're spending tapers off. So something like that. I can show you where you're at. You may have an estimate at complete or a baseline number to see where you're spending, and then you can gauge it against that to see, you know, if you actually made it. Okay. And then reserve analysis, take a look at, do you have money left over, right? If all of our risk events actually take place, do we have enough contingency reserves? Do we have enough money to perform mitigating activities, right? Is that there? Does that exist? So we can look at reserve analysis as well to understand how the project is doing financially.